This is the razor that I'm going to be making in this video. I started out by laying out some lines on some 5/16 inch W2 stock. I'm going to go ahead and cut out a portion of the tail because I want to save some wear and tear on my arm and I don't feel like forging it out. That's the shop setup, the little forge and the hammer and vise. I cut out the sections where it was sitting in the forge for a long time. I'm just trying to show a little bit of every step. I like to do the tangs first when I do the razors. And now I'm just breaking the corners a little bit on the tang. Now I'm starting on the blade portion. I alternate back and forth to the sides. Whatever I do to one side, I try to do to the other side to keep things even. Now I'm getting rid of some of that banana shape in the blade, straightening it out a little. I don't want it to be too bowed. Now I'm going to anneal the blade before I start doing some hand work on it. Now I'm just getting all the scale from forging off the blade with a wire brush. Going to refine the shape a little bit with power tools and hand tools. Here's my grinder I use for most everything. It's a 2x72. And now I'm starting the rough grind process. And I want to say a big thank you to Bruno from Snail Forge in Belgium for showing me his grinding technique. I don't quite do the same thing, but I'm borrowing some of his ideas definitely. I'm using a 36 grit built here, I believe. And a 4-inch wheel. Drilling a 3/32 hole for the tang. I'm putting some layout fluid on it now so I can see where I'm working. I'm using the angle grinder to do some of the rough work here. It saves time with the file. I'm changing to a finer grit belt here. And I'm trying to get rid of some of the sharp corners and sharp edges and round off all the sharp edges prior to heat treat to reduce my chances of it breaking during heat treat. So now I'm going to normalize it. Just brought it up to critical and letting it air cool. And now I'm cleaning off the scale from normalizing because I want a good tooth for the clay to stick to. I'm going to put clay on the blade. And it's satinite clay I'm putting on. I'm brushing it on. I just want to get somewhat of an interesting temper line. Now I'm drying the clay in a little toaster oven. So I'm getting ready to heat treat it, putting it in the oven now. I'm going to quench this in water. I pull it out of the oven and put it in the water and it cracks. So that blade was scrapped. So I started another razor so I could finish the video. There's the second razor I started on top. This one I'm going to quench in oil. So I pulled it out of the oven and quenched it in Parks 50. And that's my tempering set up. I'm just tempering it in hot oil. I have a PID controlling the fryer there. So now I'm starting the final grinding. Still using a coarse belt. It's probably a 60 grit belt. Really don't remember. And I ground through the blade. I scrapped a second razor right there. So I built a third razor so I could finish the video again. There's the third razor on the bottom. And here I am setting the bevel for the first time. I have the spine up in the air and I'm pressing hard. A lot of downward pressure just to set the bevel. Now I'm laying the razor flat on the hone and setting the bevel for the first time. It's a coarse diamond hone. And here's the razor. And you can tell by the width of the bevel where I need to grind more. The heel needs quite a bit more work. I'm moving to a finer grit belt now. I believe it's a 220. And I'm going to lower the speed on the grinder. And I'm setting the bevel again so I can check on my grinding progress, see where the blade needs to be thinner. Now I'm starting on the hand sanding. I have a piece of wet dry sandpaper wrapped around a piece of automotive heater hose, and that's my sanding block. And I'm using Windex as a lubricant. And now I'm laying out the scales, and I believe that's black paper micarta I'm using. I think it's around 100,000ths of an inch thick, if I remember. Just had it rough cut out on the bandsaw, and now I'm sanding it close to the line. I'm using double-sided Scotch tape to hold the two scale halves together when I grind them so they'll come out identical. Using a 3/32 drill bit to drill the holes for the pivots. I'm using a little 1/4-inch wheel to do the texturing on the scales with on the belt grinder. And I'm using some coarse emery to buff the scales after doing the texturing. Laying out where I'm going to make the wedge. The wedge material is a little piece of red G10, I believe. Now I'm going to taper the wedge. The wedge needs to be tapered toward the back of the razor. And now I got the razor mocked together with nuts and bolts before I start pinning it. I'm sanding the wedge flush with the scales now. Now I'm going to start the pinning process. And I need to say another thank you to Tom from Houston for his idea of using an old drill chuck as a pin chuck. I'm using the drill chuck to hold pin stock while I do the first side of the rivet. I'm just adjusting the height right now. I like pinning the first side off of the razor like this now that I've started doing it this way. Now I'm pinning the second side. I'm using a stencil to mark my name on the blade. First I etch it, then I mark it. This is ferric chloride. I'm going to dip the blade in the ferric chloride to bring out the temper line. Now I'm starting to sand the temper line. This is a long process. There's a lot of polishing involved to make it show up. Now I'm pinning the pivot end of the blade. Starting the sharpening on a 1K Waterstone. Then a 4K Waterstone. Then to an 8000 grit. And the last stone I'm going to use is this 12,000 grit Waterstone. So here's the razor again. It took me 3 tries, but the third one finally worked. Scrapped 2 during the process. Thanks for watching.